let's look at when we have larger numbers and we can't exactly count fruits or count our hands per se, but what we can do is use a method called vertical addition. Right? We use a method called vertical addition. Okay? Now, this is a straightforward way to add, right? And I'm going to walk you through the steps of how to tackle a question where we're using vertical addition, right? So, let's say, for example, we have 24 plus 12. Right? Now, these are big numbers, yes. We can use our hands or we can use an object to count them, but we have this method, right? So, the first step, right, that we do is we write the numbers below one another, right? So, we will have 24 and 12 here, right? And then my plus sign goes there, okay? So let me just remove this little bit. Okay, so this is what it will look like, right? So the first thing after doing this is I would like you to label the place values, right? So here, the first digits on the right are what we call units. And then the numbers preceding that, we call that tens. So it continues on going to hundreds, thousands, and so on, right? And then the second step is we start adding from the right. So we add the units, right? These are units or ones, right? So essentially what we have here is 4 plus this 2, okay? So here I will use the fruits just to show you. So I have 4 here plus 2, okay? That becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? So we put down the 6 here directly below the units column, okay? And then the next thing is we move on to the tens. Now, here I have 2 tens, I have 2 tens and 1 10, right? So if I put them together, I have 3 tens now, right? So these are 3 sets of 10, okay? So that now equals to 3 here, right? And my answer will be 36, okay? I hope that's straightforward and you understand what I mean by that. Now, let me show you another example where we're adding two two-digit numbers, okay? So let's say we have 42 plus 10, right? Now, remember that first step I spoke about. The first step is writing them below, one below the other, okay? And then our addition sign is there. Okay. Right, and then the next step was to label, okay? So I'm going to label that as my units and then that as my tens, okay? Now we start adding from the units. So if we say 2 units plus 0. That means I have no fruits on this side. So 2 units plus 0, if I put them together, that still leaves me with 2. So I put my 2 there, okay? And then move on to the tens. Now, what I do with the tens now, same thing. I'm gonna take my 4 tens from here, and then just 1 10 here, okay? And if I add these two together, that gives me 5 tens. So now I have 5 sets of 10, okay? So that becomes 52, okay? Let me show you a third example, a third and final example of adding 2-digit numbers, okay? So, I will look at, let's say I have 11 plus 23, okay? Remember, the first step is to write them one below the other with my plus sign there, okay? So that is my first step. And then the next thing, remember, labeling, that's units, that's tens, okay? So I attack the units first, right? So for 11, there is 1 unit, okay? Plus 3 units, all right? So 1 unit plus 3 units, okay? So if I put them together like so, that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So there are 4 units in the answer there, okay? And then the next thing is I move on to the tens, right? Here I have 1 10 plus, okay? 1 10 plus 2 tens, right? And if I put these together or add them together, that gives me 3 tens, okay? And then that is 3 there, and our answer is 34, okay? Now, let's move on to adding 3-digit numbers, okay? So the first number we're going to look at is, let's say we have, sorry, don't think that's visible, but so the first number we have is 115 plus 453, okay? The steps haven't changed. We do the same thing. So the first thing I want you to do is write the two numbers one below the other, okay? So that is 115 there. Then my plus sign plus 453, okay? Now, the next step is I label. So those are my units, these are my tens, and these are my hundreds, okay? So start with the units. Remember, we always start on the right side, okay? So that's 5 units plus 3 units, okay? So that's 5 units. That's 5 units. plus 3 units. Okay, if I put these together, that becomes what? That becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we have 8 units in our answer. Okay, and then the next one is I add the tens. So in 115 there is 1 10. Okay, and then in 453 I have 5 tens. So that's 1 10 and 5 tens. Added together, I put them together. That gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that gives me 6. All right. And then the next one, again, I have 100. Right? 100 plus 400. Right? So I have one set of 100 and then 4 sets of 100. If I put these together, that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So that gives me 5 hundreds. So the answer here is 568. Okay? Now, let's look at another one. Let's look at another one. Sorry, let me just clear that out. Okay. Now, let's look at another example where perhaps we're adding one 2-digit number and one 3-digit number. Okay, so let's say I have 32 plus 566. Again, the first step is to write one below the other. So that gives me 32 plus 566. It doesn't really matter what order you write them. You can have 566 plus 32. It will give you the same exact answer. Okay? But I am going to be working like this. So the first step again is to label. Right? So that's our units. Then the tens and then the hundreds. Okay. So let's look at the units. In the first one I have 2 units. 2 units plus 6 units. Right? Okay. Plus 6 units. Sorry. Seems to be in a rush to be added there. Okay, so when I put these together, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my answer here for the units is 8. Okay? And then let's move on to the tens. Okay? Let's move on to the tens. In the first one, I have 3 tens. Okay? That's 3 tens. Plus 6 tens. Alright? That gives me 6 tens. Right? So, sorry. 6 tens, right? So I put these two together, like so. That gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 3 tens plus 6 tens will give me 9 tens, right? So that's 9 sets of 10, okay? And then we move on to the hundreds. But as you can see, right, as you can see, there is nothing here. So that is simple. We take that as a 0, right? We can take that as a 0 because there's nothing. And then here we have 5 hundreds. Okay, so 0 plus 5. Okay, that gives me, that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because 5 plus 0 is 5. Okay? So I put my 5 there. And the answer is 598. Okay? Now, let's look at a third one. Let's look at a third one that says 701 plus 152. Okay? So the first step again is to write them one below the other. Okay? Like so. And then of course label. And then for the units, that's 1 unit plus 2 units. That's 1 unit plus 2 units. That gives me a total of 3. So 1, 2, 3. All right? So that gives me 3. Move on to the tens. That's 0 plus 5. 0 plus 5. Yet again, 0 plus 5 will give me 5. Okay? And then we move on to the hundreds. The hundreds here, I have 7 hundreds and 100 here. So if I take 7 hundreds, right, that's 7 little fruits to represent, right? That's 7 plus 1. If I put these together, that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my final answer is 853. Okay?